townhouse on a quiet Brooklyn street once seemed to Emma like a small greenhouse for two. White brick, French windows, a maple bee for the stoop, rustling with foliage like a greeting. Now the walls as if have moved apart the rooms of lost density. The sound of steps has become dull, and the draft has acquired a taste of dust and long-stored melancholy. On the shelves their wedding photos are still standing, but even the frames have faded. The gold has turned into a dull bronze shade. Emma notices this in the morning, pouring coffee from the espresso machine, and notes to herself, the colour of love tarnishes like metal if it is not polished. In the neighbouring room, Martin, in an impeccably ironed shirt, gathers laptop and chargers with that mechanical precision that long ago displays spontaneity. "You late again?" asks Emma, not looking at him, as if talking with her own shadow. "Conference in Chicago, you'll be back on Sunday," the answer dry, like a checklist. He kisses her on the temple automatically and is already reaching for the jacket when he throws, "Oh yes, on the weekend 3 guys from the Atlanta office will fly into us. Maybe you'll look after them." I promised that they would feel at home. His request falls into the kitchen silence like an ice cube into a glass, a quiet crackle, cold across the skin. Emma wants to ask why guess if you will not be here, but she asks a completely different question. "They're good." "Excellent," a nod, as if a sum has been issued. He is already scrolling the newsfeed on the phone. The screen reflects in his pupils stronger than his own wife. Emma answers of course, because the word of course is the safest lifebuoy in a sea of distancing. 5 years ago Martin could wake Emma at 3 at night, only to show on the tablet a landscape from a future vacation. Now the night hours belong to the screen of his laptop, to negotiations and reports. "We are growing," he says. "We are shrinking," she thinks. Especially painfully it became for Emma after the last Monday. Martin returned late, smelled of someone else's hotel gel, and instead of the usual "I missed you" pronounced, "Cozy, yes." Such proper silence. Emma smiled, but inside a string snapped. For her it was a dead silence, reminding of a morgue, the place where bodies are still here, and life is already not. Since then every movement of Martin left behind a vacuum. His suitcase a vacuum, his Bluetooth headset a vacuum, his lotion smell dissolving in the air also a vacuum. In it even the words disappeared that she tried to say aloud. When he closes the door, the townhouse sighs with a draft. Emma remains alone with a mug of coffee and the feeling that right now someone blew out the flame, but the wick is still hot. She sits at the kitchen table, the tablet opens the calendar, the empty cells of the week and gape-like windows of an abandoned house. She has no plans, no guests, not even a cat that would remind of its presence. And suddenly on the screen pops up a letter from Martin, forwarded from corporate correspondence. "Guys, use my house as if it's yours." The last phrase hooks Emma's heart like a rusty nail. And does he himself still consider this house his? The heart squeezes from a paradoxical thought. The company of strange men is a chance to feel needed. The coffee cools, but in the chest curiosity warms, like a tiny coal. In the evening she walks from room to room, putting the house in order not for Martin, but for 3 strangers who have not yet entered her life, but have already filled the air with pre-expectation. To receive guests, to cook dinner, to be the hostess, to hear laughter, even if it is not for me, she writes on a sticky note. The sticker sticks to the refrigerator as a new rule. Nothing will change Martin, but perhaps the presence of other voices will change. The microwave pings with ready soup, and this sound resembles a starting signal. Emma understands. The candle in their marriage may have burned down, but somewhere deeper there is still a reserve of warm wax that can be melted if another wick is found. She turns off the light, leaving only a night light in the corridor. The house is ready to accept someone else's breath. And in this semi-darkness she unexpectedly throws herself a challenge. "I am not obliged to become alive again, but I will at least try to open the door." Saturday dragged on like a sleepy lead veil until the first lights lit on the fads of Brooklyn. Emma set the table, a simple linen tablecloth, warm yellow plates, a transparent carafe with homemade lemonade. She listened to the ticking of the wall clock as if to a countdown to something unknown. 2018, a black Tesla quietly rolled to the curb. Headlights caught the wet shine of asphalt. The rain had just ended. The air smelled of electricity and spicy maple earth. Emma felt how her heart plummeted either down or up. Quincy came out first, tall, straight shoulders, but the main thing a calm, open gaze, as if trust lives in him by default. Behind him, Omar, a little lower in height, fingers immediately slid along the lapel of the coat, checking whether the fabric had wrinkled, a gesture attentive, almost caring. Last, Ty, a light gait, as if he carries in himself a rhythm, invisible but audible to the inner ear. "Emma?" asked Quincy, managing to remove his hat before pronouncing her name. "Welcome," she answered, surprised at how confidently her voice sounded. They took off their shoes in the hallway, politely, without pathos, and she suddenly realized that she did not feel embarrassment, only a warm flutter of curiosity. On the stove stewed chicken in peanut sauce, a spicy aroma filled the kitchen, mixing with the tart smell of lime. Emma was bringing rice to the table when Ty noted, "Smells like at my mother's house when hibiscuses in the garden began to bloom." An ordinary phrase, but spoken so that her heart made a small somersault. At the table they ate as if it was something more than dinner, lips marveled at each flavor, comments poured like kind sparks. Quincy told how in Atlanta every spring on the streets one hears the smell of jasmine, and Emma caught herself inhaling, as if jasmine were about to break through the walls. Omar, quieter, asked short questions about her work, about the color of walls, about how she chooses fabrics. And when she answered, he nodded so attentively, as if these answers decided someone's fate. At one moment, Ty told a story from the office, how their boss for 3 days walked with a bright pink sticky note stuck to his heel, and no one dared to say. The laughter broke from Quincy first deep, chesty. Omar snorted with a thin angry note, and Emma laughed so loudly that she herself was frightened of the echo in the cornice. Plates clinked on the table, cheerful music of clay and metal, and suddenly the kitchen ceiling, so many weeks pressing with heaviness, seemed to rise a centimetre higher. Laughter revealed a new volume of air. "Look of Quincy." Each time Emma raised her eyes from the talented knife, she met his calm, "I am here, I see." Not flirtation attention. Silence of Omar. He rarely spoke, but when he caught her gaze, in the corners of his eyes something warm flashed, as if a quiet agreement with her internal pain. Rhythm of Ty. He tapped with fingers on the glass, an almost inaudible beat, maybe Afrobeat, maybe the heartbeat of the room. Emma felt that she had just breathing to this rhythm. When she began to collect the plates, Quincy gently intercepted them. A good guess not only takes. And all three of them filled the sink, arguing who washes the dishes. Worse, water splashed. Light reflected from wet porcelain, and Emma allowed herself to step to the doorway and just watch how strangers' hands enlivened the kitchen. At that moment she felt, the house, which had long seemed a hospital ward, now hums with the quiet current electricity that revives only broken hearts. When the clock passed 11, Emma wished the guests good night, indicated rooms. Her heart, however, was not going to sleep. She went up to herself, but could not lie down. On the ceiling of the bedroom, shadows of branches danced, and below still were heard muffled voices, velvet, respectful. She caught her reflection in the mirror. A quiet smile touched her lips, not from coquetry, but from gratitude that someone again speaks to the walls of her house so that the walls answer. 014. In the townhouse, there was no sound left except the ticking of the old clock in the hallway. Each tick tock sounds like a drop inside a cave, slowly, heavily, too loudly. Emma lies on her back, eyes open, as if someone turned on an inner spotlight. Pulse a clear metronome in her ears, but the body refuses to explain what it so waits for. Martin's absence is felt not as emptiness, but as a vacuum that draws in everything devoid of movement, curtains, hair on the pillow, thoughts. She remembers the laughter at dinner, how the air in the kitchen rose 1 degree warmer every second. The echo of laughter still trembles in the walls when she closes her eyes. She remembers the rhythm of Ty's fingers on the glass, and her breathing involuntarily adjusts. 037. The corridor floor quietly creaks, loose silk of steps, as if the wood of the old house decided to turn to the other side. Then, 2 soft knocks. Whole 5 seconds of silence. No repeats, no persuasion through the door. Emma freezes. Adrenaline rolls along the spine, but not like Penacrabber as a call. "Do you hear?" Live voices nearby. She does not answer. The knock does not repeat. A moment later, steps move away into the depth of the house, leaving after themselves a light sigh of parquet. In the room, silence again, but already not dead, but alarmed, as a hard after coffee to strong. Emma sits, hugging knees, feels the magnetism of the moment. If she remains in bed, the former emptiness will return. If she goes out, something unknown will happen. 0:45. She touches the floor with bare feet. The panels cool, as if asking, "Are you sure?" A step, another step. Shadows of the maple outside break along the walls, like motifs of Japanese shadow theatre. Turning beyond the staircase, the smell of citrus tea pulls upward with a thin stream. Emma's heart in unison with steps. Knock knock. Knock knock, already not of the clock, but hers. With each breath, she seems to wipe a layer of dust from the soul. Brooklyn Street sleep. But here, in the house, something wakes for the first time in long months. The living room is lit only by a table lamp at the sofa. An amber lampshade makes the furniture softer than in the daytime, and the air thick as honey. On the coffee table, there are 4 mugs from 1 steam risers. At the edge of the sofa sits Ty. Hair slightly tousled, palms hug the ceramic not too warm, but as if guarding a fragile vessel. He does not shudder when Emma appears, just looks and quietly smiles, like a person whom no one's insomnia surprises. Can't sleep. In a whisper, so as not to wake the walls. An electric storm in my head, she answers, feeling how her own voice rattles not from fear, but from too long silence in emptiness. Ty nods, makes a gesture with open palm to the chair opposite. Join. In that gesture, there is no pressure, only an offer to share the midnight pause. Emma sits, presses the warm cup to her hands, inhales the tart aroma of tea with ginger. Inside her, silence is rebuilt. From grave it turns into an acoustic chamber where every word can sound pure, without echo of pain. Ty's gaze softly slides over her face, demanding nothing. Not hunting, just fixing the fact you're here. I too. Between 2 cups a short electric field, it does not burn, only reminds of a vein of life under skin. From the kitchen came a light tapping like a spoon on ceramic. A second later in the doorway appears Quincy, hair tousled, in hands another mug. He sees Emma, and the corners of his lips rise with a familiar warm semicircle. Insomnia Club. He smiles half voice. Emma does not answer with words, only covers the handle of her cup with both hands, as if protecting a candle flame from wind. Ty answers for her, a short nod meaning she's here on her own impulse. Quincy lowers onto the carpet, leans against the sofa. Silence among 3 does not press, on the contrary, it balances each, as if the house finally found the right chord. Above is heard a barely distinct creak of a step apparently. Omar also decided to drink water. Emma for the first time in a long while feels herself not the hostess of empty rooms, but part of a living, slowly breathing organism. While she brings the cup to her mouth, Ty says quietly but distinctly, sometimes silence is the only language the heart hears. These words fall like a light pebble in a deep well. Around them circles, spread. Emma freezes, pressing poor sullen to lips. Inside one single question, allow the heart finally to answer. The answer is not yet spoken. The room holds its breath. The night still has a long silky hour to push them all 1 step closer to the edge of hidden thirst. 0:57. A moonstrip on the parquet stretches like a white path to the center of the living room. Ty and Quincy already sit opposite Emma. Cups are empty, but fingers still embrace poor sullen, as if trying to preserve in palms the warmth of conversation without words. Creak of the upper step and Omar appears in the doorway. He does not hurry to enter, leans with shoulder on the jamb, studying the enfilade of soft shadows that the lamp paints on the faces of the 3. Half-closed eyelids, slowed breathing, he as if checks whether this scene will endure another presence. Emma invites with a hand movement. There is enough room. Omar, without taking eyes off her, with 2 fingers touches the switch at the door and the divided light becomes a little dimmer, almost honey. In the thickening semi-darkness, the furniture loses corners, and people the armor of daytime rolls. No one hurries to speak. Ty measures rhythm, tapping a nail on the rim of the cup. Tick dash tick dash tick dash, as if calling invisible musicians. Quincy catches the rhythm with inhale-exhale. Omar connects with a quiet snap of fingers. Emma suddenly understands. Thus, almost by chance, 3 men arranged an improvised quartet, where instruments are breathing, poor sullen, and wood of the floor. The heart of the heroine picks up the tempo, and the knock of her blood becomes the 5th, invisible percussion line. The beat of Ty's metronome stops, and he for the first time breaks the spell of silence. In Atlanta we call such a night to fingertip the stars to touch. to make sure they are not of paper. Emma smiles with the corner of her lips, the smile thin, like cracked glaze. And if the stars do not answer, then you listen to what the candles say. Quincy interferes and inclines his head to the lampshade. The lamp whispers that the house is still alive. Omar still stands, but his shadow slides down the wall closer to Emma. He pronounces quietly, as if reading Dixieland prose, "Sometimes the house grows so quietly that it ceases to fit in the owner's chest. And then one has either to expand the heart or to let guess in." These words land in the center of the room like a feather, but from their weight Emma feels how inside something fragile moved and began to sing. Emma sets the cup on the table. The porcelain touches wood with a quiet ton. In response, Ty's mouth twitches, as if he heard a note he waited for. Quincy fixes his palm on the edge of the sofa, rises onto a knee and slowly, with a long pause, lays his hand over Emma's. This is not a capture, rather, a soft landing of a butterfly. Fingers do not squeeze, they only warm, the skin long, unfamiliar with attentive warmth. Omar finally approaches and sits at the feet of the chair. His gaze rises from below upward, meets her pupils and freezes. In that still gaze, permission, reinforced with a silent question, "May I stay?" Emma blinks a tiny sign yes. Something hard accumulates in the chest. At first, it seems tears. But when Emma breathes deeply, she understands. These are words that long seek a way out. The voice breaks. Ty barely noticeably squeezes her wrist, a gesture, "We're near. I am tired of being silenced in my own house." The phrase bursts out, as if a shot broke a walled-up window. After it, no excuses, no details, only a pulsating sincerity. The three men offer no advice. They simply remain without movements, without hurry. Their presence becomes a thick stitch, sewing up the hole in the fabric of loneliness. 0:59-1:12. Passes of minutes are almost unheard, but the lamp seems to flicker in the rhythm of common breathing. Ty slowly runs the thumb along the back of her hand once, twice, 3 times. "I am here." Quincy lowers his head to her shoulder, does not lean, but only gives the warmth of hair and breathing. Omar carefully covers their joined hands with his, and a composition of 3 layers comes out, like intertwined roots around a fragile sprout. Emma feels how along the spine a tremor rises, not from fear, but from the stronger surprise. One can be in center of attention, and at the same time not be a thing. One can breathe loudly and hurt no one. From this tremor, she slightly turns the wrist, answering the touch. Ty quietly smiles in the soft semi-darkness, the corners of his eyes shine. Quincy lifts his head to meet face to face. No one hurries to break the barrier, but the air around Emma's wrist becomes a hot sphere, dense, like air before a thunderstorm. Inside this sphere, she for the first time in a long while hears her own heart so loudly that it seems an external sound. She understands, if she makes even half a step within an hour, nothing will return to the former shape. And if she does not, night still will not let sleep. Emma raises her look to Omar. He nods barely noticeably, as if saying the choice is yours, and we are here, whatever you decide. She breathes deeply, and with an exhale pronounces in a whisper, "I no longer want to be empty." The words tremble like a candle. Everything else only silence, ready to pick up this confession and carry to what will happen in the next second. 1:14. After her whisper, "I no longer want to be empty," silence seems to clap shutters. From inside the house a light crunch is heard. It is the furniture that has accepted a new configuration of air. Ty first removes his palm, not retreating, but to look straight into her eyes. He pronounces barely audibly, as if giving a key. Each yes lives while it is heard. Emma covers his fingers with her own. "This is her I hear." Quincy exhales. Omar closes his eyes, as if thanking darkness for confirmation. The lamp is dim to minimum. The color of amber becomes almost red, like coal after flame. In it the skin loses everyday shade and begins to glow from within. Ty takes a plaid from the sofa, spreads on the carpet, not as an alter ego of a bed, but as a neutral territory where rules are born anew. Movement slow, so that the heart has time to believe. Nothing will happen without consent. Quincy touches Emma's shoulder with a palm up, as if offering to dance. Omar remains half a step away, his role to hold the space whole. When Ty's fingers slide along the inner side of her wrist, Emma feels not a touch, but a reading, like a long, long forgotten letter written in Morse code. Quincy supports her second hand. His palm is wide, warm, but does not squeeze. On the contrary, opens fingers so that blood could flow freely. Omar moves behind her back, not touching, but his breathing coincides with hers, and from that Emma's back ceases to tremble. Inside arises a strange sense of support. 3 points around, like the vertices of a stable tripod on which stands a camera shooting the very soul. The clock in the hallway strikes 1:27, but the blows are almost not heard. The noise of blood drowns tick-tock. Emma closes her eyes. The dark red haze under eyelids resembles an ocean when looking at the sun from below. One after another, the men approach her. Their touches are synchronous, but not negotiated, rather derived from common breathing. Quincy, a palm on the back of the head, a soft support. I am here. Tie fingers along the shoulder bone. You have the right to tremble. Omar touched the rib with his palm, leaving a warm imprint. Breathe deeper. Each touch stretches Emma's inner world, as if the invisible fabric tightly squeezing her chest finally tears, letting hot air in. Tears come without knocking. They are not about loneliness and not about guilt. They are about how long the body was silent, while the heart spoke only by echo. Ty noticed the first shine on lashes. He does not wipe, only presses the back of his fingers to her cheek. The salt of tears mixes with the warmth of skin. This is the taste of proof of existence. We hold, he whispers. Until you say enough, adds Quincy. Omar does not produce any sound, but his hand lies on her solar plexus, like a lid on a dozing volcano. Exhale. Emma pronounces only one word, but it sounds louder than any confessions. More. The room needs no chronometer. Time dissolves, remains the pulse of 5 bodies, plated into a slow tide. This is not a growing grotesque, it is a careful work of fragile vessels into which warmth is poured until their walls begin to shine. Emma feels how fear globally changes into fullness. It is not evaporated, it has melted down. Where there was emptiness, now quiet viscous gold of the feeling I am visible, I matter. When a wave of warmth reaches the crown, her lips open, but instead of a scream comes a light moan. Exhale, not loud, so as not to destroy the fragile architecture of the moment. To vote 3. The lamp burns down, the filament clicks. The room sinks into semi-shade. The last touches become caresses, fingers intertwine, so that the heart has time to return to an even rhythm. Emma sits, leaning her back against the wall. Ty nearby on the floor, Quincy half lying, leaning on an elbow. Omar turns off the lamp completely and sits near, body to body. Silence returns, but now it is not dead emptiness, but a quiet rustle of soil soaked by night rain. Emma listens to her breathing. She is alive, and this knocks louder than any voice. 2:37. When Emma's eyes begin to stick together, Quincy covers her with a plaid. No one calls each other into the guest room. The townhouse accepts them where they tie. Sofa, carpet, chair. Before falling asleep, Emma feels around her not guards, not contenders, but 3 quiet presences that will sit at doors while she for the first time in many nights falls asleep without fear of waking again empty. Light seeps through dense curtains like warm milk slowly and silently. 7:12. Emma opens her eyes and feels the body has become heavier, but not from fatigue, from fullness, as if in the night someone poured into the vessel the missing milliliters of life. On the sofa, a little farther, Ty sleeps, covering his face with a palm. Quincy settled on the carpet, hugging a plaid as if holding someone else's secret. Omar sits by the window half sleepy, but awake when Emma's gaze meets his. He simply puts a finger to his lips and nods, calmly. Breathe. She rises, barefoot steps tread carefully, so as not to spill the fragile morning silence. The kitchen counter shines like a clean sheet. On it, folded in half, a card from a consumables notebook. Even, clear handwriting. Emma does not yet know whose exactly. To feel what you felt was real. You owe us nothing, but not to forget how your living breath sounds. Keep it. Q.T. No, the note smells of jasmine. Apparently, someone's hands held it longer than required before laying it down. Emma presses the paper to her chest. The heart beats loudly, gratefully. Words are almost unnecessary. Omar helps to fold the plaid. Ty carries the cups to the sink and lets water flow, the sound similar to a brook washing away night shadows. Quincy checks whether any creases remained on the sofa and looks around, as if asking the room to forgive them for intrusion. At the door, the 3 put on coats. Emma's gaze clings to each, not farewell, but thank you for being. Ty leans his palm to the doorframe, as if leaving a mark. If the house becomes empty again, we will keep our breath in it. The door closes softly. In the townhouse remains the smell of tea, warm air, and the pulsation of a new silence. It is no longer dead. It is like morning silk. 1948. The suitcase clicks on the threshold. "How was the trip?" asks Emma, straight-unning. "Exhausting," answers Martin, kisses her on the cheek out of habit. Colleague satisfied. "Very." They said they felt at home. He nods, already scrolling mail on the phone, and passes to the second floor. Emma looks after him and suddenly understands. The sound of his steps on the stairs no longer fills the house inside her now own music. At dinner, Martin speaks about clients, about new capis. Emma nods, but in her head a procession of completely different images, the lampshade, the tremor of porcelain, Ty's words about the stars, the warm vibration of Quincy and the silent gaze of Omar, in which she truly reflected. A couple of weeks in a row Emma falls asleep late. In a notebook with a dark green cover lee pages of confession, I was silence and became a cord. Guilt does not go away, but becomes a thin golden vein binding the fracture. Sometimes fidelity to oneself turns out truer than vows spoken for a check mark. Each letter ends "do not forget." She hides the sheets between the pages of Mary Oliver's collected poems, like post-war notes, under a foundation. Spring reaches Brooklyn. The maple before the house releases the first fiery gold buds. Emma, as usual, fills work briefs on the laptop. But now in the schedule are inscribed hours for her own walks and small joys, a ceramic circle on Saturdays, jazz sessions in Bar Luntico on Wednesdays. One day she puts on the mantel a photograph not of herself with Martin, but a delicate shot of jasmine thickets, taken on the phone. It smells of that note reminder. Martin again packs a suitcase, another business trip. Before leaving he looks at the new photo, raises an eyebrow, but does not ask. Perhaps he does not want to hear the story. Perhaps he's not yet able to bear it. Emma smiles, safe flight. When the door closes, she breathes deeply. The house does not empty and it remains a light echo of the night quartet, a golden vein along the crack that fasten the fragile cup of life. Emma brews tea with ginger, puts the cup on the table and writes in the notebook a new line. The height remained the same, but I have grown wings. Not for flight, but to keep myself at the level of breathing. She closes the notebook, opens the window. The May wind rustles leaves, and in that rustle she hears her own pulse steady, alive, unforgotten.